light the beam, because it's time for Nerdy for 30, the summer of X-Men, the podcast where we talk about X-Men movies for 30-ish minutes. My name is Kevin Bauer, a.k.a. The Critic's Choice. With me, as always, the People's Champ, Tim Keck.
Hey.
Just a solemn nod.
Yeah, buddy.
A solemn nod is what we get. And today, we are talking about the New Mutants. Now, Tim, inside every person, there are two bears. We are those two bears. What did you think of this movie?
Kevin, this movie made me want to climb to the top of a clock tower, stand out on the ledge, look over the side. But at some point, something pulled me back in, and I had an okay time.
All right.
It's okay. I've actually seen this movie a few times, and it's either growing on me or I just know it's not good, and I'm focusing on the things that are fun about it. Mm-hmm. This is very okay to bad. But there are things about it that I've grown to really like. What about you?
You know, I think the most surprising thing that happened in this movie for me was finding out that Wolfsbane's name is pronounced Rain for years. Since childhood.
What do you think it was?
I thought it was Ron. It's Rahne. The whole time. I've never said it out loud before because now it sounds like Ronald. And that's kind of funny in its own way. But it's kind of like, it's similar to like finding out that it's Muir Island and not like Muir Island, which I thought it was when I was a kid. And just all those things. I thought it was
Muir Island.
You read it and you have no idea. And so, yeah, it was blowing my mind. The first time she got called Rain, I was like, I'm sorry.
I like it. It's a catchy name. It's just kind of a nice character, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, where do we start? Where do we start
with this? Let's start at the beginning. I don't know about you, but I've done a few deep dives into inspirational quotes. I may have an intensive backlog of animated inspirational quotes, that have different artists' interpretations. I'll tell you what is one of the most common ones ever is the story of how there are two wolves inside of you. Mm-hmm. And one is fear, one is light, good, like light and dark. Which one wins? The one you feed. And they use this to punctuate both. For some reason, the fact that they changed it to bears, I just don't think that's what the saying is. I've seen wolves everywhere. I've never seen a single one that says bears.
Same
and
here.
Something about the fact that it's a bear. I know it's a spirit bear. This is like the most famous New Mutants, event is them battling this spirit bear. Kind of kickstarted their whole comic. And yet I find it so lame. And at the end, when they finish the quote, I also find it so lame. It is just like a weird kind of unexciting note to start and end on. But I get how at some point a producer was like, no, this is gonna blow minds. She's talking about the bears inside of us, and then she's gonna fight an actual bear. It's like, okay, whatever, all right, I guess. It doesn't work if it's wolves. It has to be bears, but then maybe don't use the quote. Maybe who cares about the quote? But I guess it does fit into this. I don't know. That's kind of how I feel about the whole movie is there's like, I get why you did a lot of this, but also, it could have been different. You probably should have just let it be different. And why are you presenting these things this way? Just let them happen. You know?
I mean, this is like the bear thing falls into some of the things that I hate the most about when people haphazardly make things, which is it's a mixed idiom. You're switching it from wolves to bears because there's a bear in the movie, right? Mm-hmm. Which would seem to suggest that you like the meaning of the phrase itself, but you want to change it to be more specific to the movie, which would suggest that there's something that's inherent about the movie that relates to the two wolves story. And I don't think there is. I don't really think at any point in this movie, people are actually choosing whether to become good or bad. Outside of some idle conversation about how it might be cool to become an X-Man, if the entire movie was a conflict between whether they should be villains with their powers or heroes with their powers, by all means, go for it. Use the wolf thing, make it bears, do whatever you want. But why would you change it? I looked it up as we were talking just now. It is wolves. The actual thing is wolves. The only thing that uses bears is this movie.
So do you see they also put a ton of weight on the word fear?
Yes.
Which is, you're right. The fact that you just said now, like, nobody makes a choice between good and evil. I was like, it just came to me that, oh, that's actually an aspect of this quote, because they beat you over the head with fear. They really make you think that this whole quote is about you can be scared or you cannot be scared. But it is really about living a life of good and positivity, or dwelling on the negative, and how you kind of become the person that you emulate in that regard. But they kind of dumb it down to bears, and then it's you're unless you face your fears, you're always going to be afraid, is kind of what they dumb it down to. Yeah. And that, I say, happens in this, is like people are scared. They kind of face their fears. I think that could have been more satisfying too in a lot of ways. But they do all team up and fight a bear. So that's, I guess they kind of got that. But
I guess, but then make up your own proverb. Like, say that there's a legend, because I mean, I'm not the one making up a proverb here. They are the ones that introduced fucking around with the proverb, right? I want to get that straight right now. Them. If you're gonna do it with something that's more specific to your movie, or even better, bring up like an actual legend. I'm sure that there's a legend somewhere about somebody who had to face their fears, and use that. Like, don't co-opt something that means something completely different.
Right. This has so much. This quote has so much more depth than what they are giving it. There's probably a quote about bears facing their fears. You're right. They could just use that. I don't know. I get why somebody read this on a poster and was like, "This is the crunch of the movie." But they do all, I guess, they all see their fears. Yeah. But they don't all overcome those fears. No, they're all presented with them. The only person who overcomes them is Ileana. Mm-hmm. She actually fights back against them. And then they all team up to fight a big bear. So them facing their fears, quote unquote, is them fighting Danny's fear. But they all still have this trauma that is unresolved. Yeah. You know, and this is a much cooler movie if each individual character is facing their past, overcoming it, and then, you know, maybe bonding through that experience to fight Danny as like the big boss with the spirit bear, you know, but
which the bones are kind of there. Yeah, the bones are kind of there. Like all the stuff with Rain and like the priest. Or you could argue that I guess at times maybe part of it is that, yeah, they have to help each other get past it, because the scene with Ileana and Cannonball in the hallway, it's her creepy masked guys that are coming after them. And then she teleports away and Cannonball rockets his way through. So best possible interpretation of that is that he had to help her through that, but she was gone. So I don't think that really works either. It just needs a rewrite.
His arc is that like the development of his power. He's a coal miner. These guys are also such weird stereotypes. It's like this dude is doing, and I like this actor. He's in Stranger Things. He's good, but he's got like this thick, weird Southern accent. Oh yeah, and he's just like pretending to be a coal miner. And
he's a coal miner, but minor.
He is in the mines, I guess, with his dad. He gets anxious or he gets fearful and his powers activate, and he ends up blasting out of the mine and killing his dad and presumably more people that are in the mine. Mm-hmm. That's a ton of trauma. And ultimately at the end of the movie, he's like, all right, we're good. And like walking off with a smile on his face. Doesn't resolve that at all. There's no part of him that has dealt with that. Roberto murdered his girlfriend because his mutation is that he turns into like a fiery guy with super strength, and he literally burned her to death because he got horny. They push him in a pool at one point, and I do like the touch that he evaporates half the water in the pool. That's kind of fun.
That was my biggest beef. There's steam really? Rising out of that. That's a chlorinated pool, Tim. They're all fucking dead. That's chlorine really? Gas that's released into that room. Have you ever heard any of the urban legends about like people who are at a sauna and they bring in some water to dump on the coals, but it's water from the pool. And so the water evaporates, but it leaves the chlorine in the water. And so it's just chlorine gas you're releasing into the room. People have these like chemical reactions to it.
Wow.
I
didn't know that.
Half of that pool away. Everybody is dead as hell.
I didn't know that. That's crazy. I think we can justify it with there's no way there's chlorine in that pool. Right. Have you seen the state of this thing? Nobody who's putting chlorine in it. There's like one woman there. You think on Sunday she's like putting on her jorts and getting out there with her brush and like scrubbing the sides of it. No, that thing's been sitting there. We don't know where that water even came from. That's like rainwater that got in somehow. That thing is disgusting, probably. The fact that it's clean at all is shocking because there's no janitor, there's no nothing. There is one quote unquote doctor running this whole operation, and then just like mutants who are very strong on the scale of like where mutant powers go. These guys are all really strong. One of them's power literally just makes a sword. And at no point are they like, let's just tie this person up and leave. You know, we can just do that. She's somehow running the whole show, and I guess, you know, brushing the pool on the weekends, making sure those tiles shine.
It makes you call into question the efficacy of the evil Essex Corporation that's putting all this together when all they can afford is one person to run this program. Like, is this commentary on like understaffed hospitals?
Do you get the impression that there have been a lot of people in that same apartment thing?
They showed they showed the footage from Logan of the kids with like the alkali group, right? Being kind of like kidnapped and experimented on.
But that's not in this place.
That's not in this place. I thought there was going to be a twist, but we find out this is just like a misery situation where this one woman kidnapped these kids, because it's like there can't possibly be a bigger organization. But meanwhile, she's got access to absolute bleeding edge technology on her computers. She's doing voice access to all these different rooms. They're measuring psionic energy, which means that we're at a point in this where not only is psionic energy recognizable, but it's also measurable. And this computer can process changes in it related to an analysis of this girl and make a recommendation based on those changes. There's a part where it's measuring Danny and it's like giving a readout and it's like recommended continue to monitor over the next 48 hours or something. It's like, how much do we know about mutant powers at this point to be able to do this?
Yeah, this is very sloppy. The background for this. Why is she here? Who has like authorized this? What is the technology? Even if we're going off of Mr. Sinister, his whole thing is that he's obsessed with like mutant DNA, specifically like the Summers family line. Mm-hmm. And he does all this weird DNA experiments with himself specifically as well. And based on his character, he could just get their DNA, get some blood samples and kill them. And it would be the same thing, right? That would be his like comic accurate character. What is the goal for this? You've seen Alana. She can teleport. She has a sword hand. What other information do you need about this? You've seen Rain. She can turn into a wolf. She can turn into a wolf person. What more do you need if you are some evil corporation? What else do you need from her? At one point, they're like, oh, they're trying to turn us into weapons. But that also doesn't seem right because she's not training them in any way.
No,
there is no training going on. There's just weird therapy. So they're not building an army. They're just kind of hanging out. And some computer tells her to watch people more or kill them, I guess, depending on what it is. But what the stakes are is very unclear. Like this whole thing is just kind of like like, what is it? Like, what is happening in this movie? It's nothing.
I never even stopped to think about that.
But watching it now, I've seen it a few times. So I'm like, I know this is nothing. So I kind of just try and enjoy seeing Cannonball, who is a character I've always liked, but never really understood. I think in the comic books, I mean, this is a guy who flies super fast and surrounds himself with a ball of energy and bounces off of stuff. And I think that's a really tricky power to show in movies and in comic books. It's just hard to show unless they did like some sort of a Quicksilver scene where he is just you like slow it down and show him ping ponging off of stuff. He just kind of lights up, flies really, really fast, and then leaves. And even in the comics, it's hard to show that kind of motion and stuff. And I always thought the description of his powers was way more interesting than the execution most of the time. So it was nice to see that little glimpse of him, I guess.
Yeah. Did you picture him talking like this?
No. I guess I thought of him with like a Georgia accent as opposed to this is like a Virginia accent, which I guess makes more sense for the mines. You know, I don't know why I thought, are there a lot of Southern mines? Where are the mines?
They're you'd think you'd want a drier climate for a mine, right? Because otherwise you're just going to hit like you can't mine in swampland. You're going to hit too much groundwater.
Yeah. Where was that place that Hillary didn't go? And then Trump was like saving the mines and then they all voted for him and he won the election.
Oh, man.
I think it was Virginia. You know, the fact that I don't know is my liberal privilege showing, you know.
Yeah.
That's a real fuck up on my part. I'm embarrassed. I'll come correct next time.
I got to follow up to this too. Who had the worst accent? Cannonball in this movie or Rupert Grint in Knock at the Cabin?
I don't even remember Rupert Grint's accent. What was his accent? Isn't it just British? Isn't he British?
No, he is British. It's the worst American accent I've ever heard. And it's not close.
This is the first time I've thought about knocking on the cabin door since we did the podcast. I mean, what a pointless movie that is.
Do you remember
not even like Furiosa pointless, like just pleasantly pointless, just like a waste of time, but it's like kind of fun.
Do you remember when the projector froze multiple times and we thought it was part of the movie every time?
That's how mediocre the movie was.
Yeah.
There were technical difficulties and we're like, maybe this is M. Night's vision.
Wow.
Brilliant.
It says a lot about how far
He's still
willing to follow him. He still has it, man. Never lost it.
I think maybe it's just how little respect everyone has for him now, where it's just like, oh my gosh, what if the tape just skipped back, 5 minutes?
Sure, maybe he's pausing this one. Maybe this one he pauses. We know he does some shit in everyone. You're about to talk about
There's always a twist.
So I admittedly, magic has never clicked with me as a character. I think there's too much going on. I think I had a lot of trouble connecting with mutants that had multiple powers until the secondary mutation thing came around. But even so, there's still a lot going on with magic where like she's like not just a mutant who can use magic, I guess kind of like Scarlet Witch's chaos magic, but she's also like a canonical magic user. Like Doctor Strange works with her and she's involved in all that stuff. And she can teleport, but she also has the sword and she's got, no matter what, like her costume never really varies from having like the black. It's like the black material that her costume is made out of that always seems like it's kind of an otherworldly thing. It doesn't really seem normal. So there's just been too much for me to ever really be interested in engaging with her in the comics.
Yeah.
I think Anya Taylor-Joy is great. She has a lot of fun with this role. This is the most I've liked the character. But you expressed that you would want magic on your team when we did the little X-Men draft. So yeah.
I like her kind of second string X-Men, when Wolverine and Colossus show up and Kitty Pryde joins the team. At some point, Colossus's younger sister, who is like 8, is just hanging out with them. And Kitty's like reading stories to her. And she's just kind of like there as like a kid living in the mansion and they're doing their best to take care of her. And then somehow she gets sucked into a magic portal, ages 8 years or 7 years and comes back. And she's like a warlock now because she was trapped in hell and had to master like hell magic. And like she now has the sword and all this stuff and she can teleport. So I think that's kind of fun. I think her character is also kind of arrogant and douchey in a fun way. Like I think of her as like roasting people and kind of irreverent. And like she's been to hell and back. Like she has like higher things to worry about than like hurting somebody's feelings or whatever. That's what's always made her kind of fun to me. Plus, I think that story is really tragic to kind of lose your childhood and get involved in this magic stuff. I was Googling before this. It seems like her mutant power is to teleport. And this other stuff is the magic. So like she summons the soul sword, and this apparently at times during the comics, I wasn't familiar with it, but other characters have carried the soul sword and like taken it from her, or she's gifted it to other people. So it is like this magical vessel. And then her armor is a magical extension of that. And she uses that as a weapon to fight spirits. And then on top of that, she's learned magic because she's like a sorceress, and basically runs hell in some versions of this. So I think she's very fascinating. If we know the character, her powers in this make no sense, right? Because she's a mutant. Her mutant power is to teleport. It's very, very weird, I think, as a mutant power. I think the dog thing is weird, right? Rain. It's like a person, and her mutation is to turn into a dog.
Yeah.
For me, that feels a little weird. Like, at what point would a human being mutate into transforming into another animal that already exists, right? Taking on animalistic characteristics. That's get that, but turning completely into a new animal is weird. The idea of mutating something that is a physical sword you can hold is weird. It doesn't make sense to me. We see Psylocke in some of these other movies, and she creates like beams of energy from her hands that she manipulates into that. And that feels different. That feels like she is creating a thing. We've seen people create energy constructs, but this is like a physical sword that I think she like kind of puts down at one point, or she stabs into the ground. Like she created a shiny sword and her eyes glow, and it's all just like a little, it does. If the premise is that these are just mutants hanging out, it's a step too far for me. You know, totally, like we need another justification for that.
Yeah, totally agree. It's like the tattoo angel wings, or the tattoo bug wings on Angel and X-Men First Class. It's like, this can't be something that's already a thing. Like it suspends disbelief too much for me when a natural physical mutation mimics an existing object in the world that was manufactured by humans. And you could argue that, I mean, no, you know what? Dogs were manufactured by humans. Dogs were specifically bred. Like, this is a recognizable breed of dog that she turns into. I completely agree that it should just kind of generally be animalistic characteristics, more so than like one recognizable animal.
One golden retriever. Yeah. You know, it's like, it's silly. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that DC does. And DC is like gods and stuff. And they have like Beast Boy, who just turns into a green animal. And it's like, that's cool, but that's like, that feels DC to me, where they're gods and there's no rules, and they aren't dealing with human problems the way that the X-Men specifically do. Mm-hmm. You know, the X-Men are worried about, I mean, Marvel superheroes are worried about being late for school and their homework. Right. You know, they're worried about asking people out.
X-Men pay taxes.
The X-Men pay taxes, and they probably do a lot to avoid it. I mean, Professor X is sitting on a real gold mine, but he's probably campaigning against, you know, increasing property taxes. He's a private school. Mm-hmm. He's probably underfunding his community. I mean, if we dig into this too much, you know, we're pulling hairs. But Kevin, when did you know that this movie was horny as hell? Because there's so unintentional stuff. At one point, Rain just sits there and says, "I masturbated twice," and it's like, what is this? You know, we get, I think, with the bear thing, where it's like, you can just do the thing and not add this flowery bullshit to allude to the fact that two women in this might kiss each other. We first watch an episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer where two women kiss each other. Yeah. Like, it's like, I don't know. It's like the kind of like cool, like woke, like boomers where they're like, oh, I have gay friends, but they always refer to them as their gay friends. Yeah. You know? Oh, I know my black friend Michael. And it's like, you can just say Michael, you know, like you don't have to add these
You're showing your hand on there. Man. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, they can just kiss, you know, like that's fine. This isn't, this isn't going to be the first time for anybody, even though apparently it was the first time women have kissed in the MC in like DC movies or something like that, or in the Marvel cinematic universe. So this might have been the first gay relationship, and they obviously handled it poorly. But maybe they thought for some reason that they had to foreshadow it, or the idea that they thought they were smart for playing Buffy, which is like a Joss Whedon thing too, which I guess he's involved in all this stuff.
It's also it's so funny because a lot of what we talked about the X-Men movies so far is that like the X-Men as a franchise in the comics and in the movies has such a strong history of being tied to justice for marginalized groups. And so therefore has like, you know, a huge LGBTQ fan base. And like, it's this thing where it's like the odds are if you're watching an X-Men movie, you're probably already on board with like any of the things they're arguing for. You're probably already on board for civil rights. You're probably already on board for equality, LGBTQ rights. So of the different movie franchises where a studio would think like, oh, we need to really prepare people for what they're going to see by showing a Buffy episode from 25 years ago, when this kind of thing was more groundbreaking to show in mass media, it's like you're just so far off the mark. Like you're preaching to the choir, and you're like, it's not just preaching to the choir. It's turning around and being like, have any of you choir members heard of the Bible?
I'm going to push back a little bit, because in previous episodes we have said that part of the charm of the X-Men is that you could not. They could be slipping all these themes right by you. Mm-hmm. So I agree with what you're saying, that we don't need, I don't think even the people being like, not down with the party or whatever are, I don't think anyone's going to needs their handheld to know that, you know, grown-ups kiss other grown-ups of the same gender sometimes. Like it's whether you like it or not, or have feelings about it, that's irrelevant. Like this isn't a thing that needs to be explained at this point in time when this movie comes out. So it's like, it's very weird. It's very weird. And then they sit around and just ask people like how many people they've had sex with. And they're like, the group dynamic is very weird. They're like very horny, dumb teenagers. But then Ileana is like so mean. Mm-hmm. And there's only like 5 of them. So you really have like a 5th person show up, and you're just going to treat them like shit. Like there's nowhere else to go. There's nobody else to talk to. You're not going to at least pretend to get along. And then magically they do the montage where, you know, they're just pushing each other in a chair. We've talked about this before in other X-Men movies, First Class, where they do this fun movie thing where everyone's having a party and they're all doing like the dumbest inhuman things possible. Two people are just in a hallway dancing together and there's no music playing. There's 2 guys pushing each other in a chair and just dying laughing. You know, like these are weird interactions that lead to them, I guess, being friends, but it's been a couple days in World and it doesn't really make sense. Now they're all hanging out, and I don't know how you're telling people like, you know, you're the devil and you're the problem here. And then the next day being like, oh, let's all hang out and talk about hooking up or something. It's the dynamic's very weird.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of like short span of time things that really do bond a group together. Obviously road trips, great. Like things that I've actually personally experienced, like a good road trip will really bond a group with each other. Dungeons and Dragons does wonders. You know, you play D&D with people, that'll get you closer.
Survivor.
Oh, Survivor is a wonderful one. Man, I've never had the opportunity to watch Survivor in a group, but I imagine it's great.
I meant being on Survivor.
Oh,
you know,
sure.
You're like thrown on an island and you have to survive. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that they would bond over a traumatic experience, but they're so mean to each other that flipping is weird to me. And then I was wondering with the bear is like the big hurdle in this, right? Where she creates this bear because she's afraid. Why is she afraid? Well, she lost her family. She's like suicidal in this. She is traumatized by this thing that happened that, the doctor's saying is a tornado and she's saying was like a creature. So she created this spirit bear that attacked her village and killed her dad.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Where did the bear come from? What is the trauma that happened before that triggered the bear? Is it just her powers? Is she just like a nervous person to be around? Because she does seem to be like pretty put together. I noticed when her and Rain are hooking up, Rain's like, oh, I've never done this before. And she's like, with a girl? She's like, oh, with anybody. And it's like, the way that comes across is that Danny has like been around the block, but she is at least like, she has experience, and it feels like she's had healthy experience because she's approaching this in a very healthy way with Rain. So you think she's had like okay relationships, or like, she doesn't seem to have trauma around anything.
Sure.
Aside from this thing that she did, which would have been triggered by trauma, but there's no source to any of this, I guess is what I'm saying.
See, I thought because she's manifesting other people's fears, I thought the bear was her dad's fears. And then I thought it became her fear after her exposure to it. But even so, it's something
that's good.
But it's weird because it's so big. Everybody else's fears are pretty normal sized, like Rain's fear isn't a 30-foot tall priest. It's a priest. And like same thing for the Slenderman that Ileana imagines. So the fact that the bear, even if it was like, if her dad was afraid of a 30-foot bear for some reason. Huh.
Yeah. What does the bear represent? Is he afraid of things? It makes sense that she would see a bear, but I guess she doesn't really see a bear. She sees a creature.
Yeah.
So that I don't know. There's whatever. I mean, this was like a weird production too.
Yeah, I know.
This movie was like delayed multiple times. I mean, there was all kinds of stuff backstage. They were trying to get it made. They shot half of it and stopped in the middle and then started filming more of it. And all of these I think they did reshoots and the actors had aged like 3 years in between or something like that. Like it was just a weird production and we got a weird movie, but you can kind of see, if you're nice about it, you can kind of see there's something here. There's something here that could have been good. I like the idea. It's also a bummer that this might be like the end of, not the end of it, but this is a bad step for having genre movies that are in a hero world, because the idea of having specifically a horror movie that takes place with mutants, it was talked about forever. And then the final product does not deliver. And I think it really dissuaded that kind of action going forward. In some ways, we get heists, we get espionage, but it would be great to have like the new Blade movie be like a horror movie or something, or have
fucking cool.
New Mutants are actually perfect for this. This is actually, if you have to pick a comic to be a horror movie, I think this is like really good. I think the idea of this is really smart.
Yeah.
Just like the execution's bad on it.
Damn, I want to see James Wan take this on, or like the Talk to Me guys. Have them take this on in the MCU reboot. Yeah. Just have them do it like after we graduate the first class of mutants out. Oh, it could be so cool. It really could be. The vibe at times in this movie is actually good. It was shockingly watchable for being definitely a bad movie, but its biggest flaw is mostly just its messiness. Like nothing's that actively off-putting. It's not like the performances outside of the one accent are that bad. It's just kind of a miss. Listener, what do you think? Let us know. Send us an email, nerdy430@gmail.com. We'll read it on the show. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back here again. We're now moving into the Logan and Deadpool aspects of all this. So I think the next movie up is Logan. We'll see you back here with that on Thursday. Until then, stay nerdy, everybody. Bye.
Stay nerdy. Bye.